After a downward trend for the last few years, the results of the Federal Employee Survey sent to some 840,000 federal employees reveals a 1% increase in both employee engagement and global satisfaction scores. And of that number, nearly 421,000 people replied, and this data was sorted by OPM to provide a number of useful metrics, some that are quite encouraging. For example, 96% of federal employees surveyed are willing to put in the extra effort necessary to get the job done. 90% are consistently looking for ways to do better and feel that the work that they do is important. And I must stress that as I have talked to federal employees, that this does not come as a surprise to me, and it's something that we need to do a better job in Congress of sharing with the American taxpayer, that we have committed federal employees. Yet some employee perceptions, and I'm sad to say perceptions by some in Congress of agency leaderships, continue to struggle. Only 50% of employees had positive things to say about the honesty and integrity of their leadership. This should remain as a concern for agencies' leaders with managing our nation's more than 2 million public servants. And in the area of promotions and dealing with poor performers, survey results are even more alarming. Only 33% of the workers agreed with the statement that promotions in their work unit are based on merit. 28% of the employees said that the necessary steps are taken to deal with poor performers. And only 21% of employees across the government said that pay raises depend on how well the employees perform their jobs. So over the past year, I've had the pleasure and the honor of visiting numerous federal agencies, the most recent just a couple of days ago across the Washington, D.C. area. I've had the opportunity to discuss a variety of topics with federal employees, including employee engagement and satisfaction. I've met with federal employees from NASA to GAO, the Archives, MSPB, CBP, Air and Marine Operations, and I've always enjoyed it and appreciated the opportunity to visit with our federal workforce. This week, as I was just mentioning, I was able to visit the Air and Marine Operations Manassas Air Branch, where I had the opportunity to meet and speak with AMO pilots and those that serve in that capacity, as well as serve the operation. I was highly impressed not only by their commitment to serving and protecting the American people, but I also wanted to thank them for sharing more with me about their mission, because it was one of those things that a lot of people don't know about, even members of Congress. And so today we're joined by a number of agencies near the top and bottom of the best places to work rankings, as well as the most improved agencies from 2015. NASA has ranked #1 for large agencies in the best places to work rankings for the past 4 years with an index score of 76.1 out of 100. Congratulations. Last year I had the opportunity to not only meet with employees at NASA, enjoying that visit with staff and learning more about the mission and vision. I'd like to hear more about NASA's engagement, employee engagement efforts undertaken at the agency that allows them to remain at the top of the rankings. The Department of Homeland Security, who also joined us last year, continues to remain last in the rankings with an index score of 43.1 out of 100. DHS has ranked 19 of 19 in large agencies on factors such as effective leadership, fairness, empowerment, and skills to match the mission. As many of you know, we've had Secret Service hearings. I've had a number of Secret Service employees who have reached out to me personally about just concerns that they've had, and the Secret Service employees ranked their workplace as 319th out of 320 in the agency subcomponent. Additionally, Immigration and Customs Enforcement ranked 318 out of 320. Both of those areas have been areas that we've addressed in this particular committee, and I'm hopeful that we'll be able to discuss those today, Ms. Bailey, as we look at DHS to have a plan to take ownership to ensure that its employees are engaged, and how DHS plans to improve the employee satisfaction and commitment at the agency. The Department of Labor is the most improved large agency for 2015 with an index score of 63.1 out of 100. DOL has improved from 17th in the 2013 Best Places to Work to a ranking of 8th in 2015, so congratulations. HUD is the most improved mid-size agency for 2015 with an index score of 52.3 out of 100. And HUD is ranked 21st out of 24 for mid-size agencies and had an 8-point increase in their index score. For both DOL and HUD, I hope to hear about some of the initiatives that your agencies have undertaken that has led to this significant increase in the employee satisfaction and commitment. Obviously, the Partnership for Public Service also joins us today. Perhaps can share some of your observations on employee engagement and offer some suggestions for agencies to improve the employee engagement efforts. Before I close, I wanted to also mention at the last hearing, there were two different things that came out of that. We had different people testifying. The archivist, I talked to him the other day, and he mentioned a 4-point increase in their score that they're paying attention. We are paying attention to this in a bipartisan way. The other thing that came out with Secretary Johnson, we had the title of this was The Worst Places to Work in the Federal Government. And he admonished me both privately and publicly that we ought to change the title of that. So indeed, we have listened to that and have changed the title. But I also want to stress today that the fact that you're here as witnesses and joining us here today is an important part of making sure that we address the concerns that have been raised by the rank and file, and I want to thank you for that. And with that, I would like to recognize the ranking member of the Subcommittee on Government Operations, my good friend, Mr. Conley, for his opening statement.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. And I can only imagine with others what the change in title might have been. So maybe we're lucky with the title we had. Employee engagement plays an important role in an agency's mission success. The more employees are engaged, the more invested in the operation and productive they become. As the subcommittee charged with oversight of government operations, it seems to me we should be encouraging such engagement to ensure that the Federal workforce is motivated to deliver quality services for our constituents, just as we do in the private sector. Today's hearing brings together a range of agencies, those with the highest and lowest scores, as well as those most improved, as you indicated, Mr. Chairman. 2015 ranking shows signs of improvement, with 70% of agencies improving their satisfaction and commitment scores. That's a welcome turnaround from the 43% comparable figure in 2014 and a mere 24% in 2013. However, obviously there's always room for improvement. I'm encouraged by the 2015 government-wide results showing a 1.2-point increase from 2014. This is the first increase following 4 straight years of decline since 2010. It's about time we see some positive signs, and I'm hopeful maybe the tide is turning. Not only did employee satisfaction improve, but so did scores in all 10 workplace categories, such as effective leadership, employee skills and agency mission matches, pay, teamwork, training, development, and work-life balance. When we all congratulate NASA, which again ranks #1 among large agencies for the 4th year in a row. Its successful record of fostering employee engagement is credited to matching employee skills with agency mission, fostering teamwork and innovation, and satisfaction with pay. And I'm going to be particularly interested, Max, in your analysis of that and yours as well. But how much of that is the mission that just elevates my whistling when I go to work every day, because other agencies can't compete with that if that is the dispositive factor. But it's worthy of some examination. Department of Labor is once again the most improved large agency. This can be attributed in part to new workplace flexibility and telework initiatives. As the co-author of the telework legislation back in 2009-2010, I'm delighted to hear that. Expanding the use of telework's been such an important part of trying to improve, actually, workplace productivity and morale. So congratulations on taking advantage of the Telework Enhancement Act, which requires all agencies to incorporate telework into their continuity of operations plan. The Department of HUD is the most improved mid-size agency, and I'm pleased to see Secretary Castro utilizing innovative online communication tools and town hall meetings to solicit employee feedback. Unfortunately, the Department of Homeland Security continues to struggle with employee morale and satisfaction, but I want to make clear that the purpose of this hearing is not to browbeat. We want to better understand and see what we can do to try to help. We must remember that DHS was created under the most intense pressures following 9/11. It combined all or part of 22 federal agencies under one roof with the incredible difficult mission of protecting the American people from a variety of threats. As the newest cabinet-level agency, DHS continues to experience growing pains, and in some cases, the lack of logical glue for why something fits within DHS, or at least arguably so. So obviously, we want to learn a lot more today about the recently created Employee Engagement Steering Committee and how it might help. It's our hope that we use today's hearing to better understand the challenges you all face and to identify best practices that could be helpful to improve employee engagement. I thank the partnership for its work. These rankings and the Office of Personnel Management's Federal Employees Viewpoint Survey, upon which they are based, are very powerful tools, and again, often used in the private sector as well. Mr. Chairman, employee engagement is not an issue about which only agencies need to be concerned. Congress also has a vested interest in the satisfaction of federal employees, as we are their employer. And I want to commend you for your efforts to visit federal agencies to hear employee concerns firsthand. I, of course, do that going home every night. But really, you've done a great job in making that part of your mission so that you're getting firsthand evidence and information. And sometimes that changes our perspective and our opinion. And that, Chairman Meadows deserves great credit for doing that. I'm also heartened by the progress made. We must not forget the tremendous difficulty that federal employees have faced over the last few years. Sequestration cuts imposed by Congress caused nearly 1 million federal employees, 1 million, to be furloughed for some time, and the uncertainty and anxiety that created. A budget standoff led by some in this body forced a 16-day government shutdown in 2013, the first in 17 years. Federal employee pay was frozen 3 consecutive years. Retirement benefits were reduced for new employees, and training budgets were slashed. In all, federal employees were hit with more than $180 billion in compensation cuts, the only group of Americans targeted by Congress to contribute to deficit reduction explicitly. So it should come as a little surprise that federal employees during that time period were feeling unappreciated and often demoralized. As Congress prepares for the annual appropriation process to fund the government, let's learn from the painful experience of recent history. I'd like to remind everyone that next week is Public Service Recognition Week. I feel that Congress should give federal employees credit and recognition for the incredible work they do, day in and day out, in serving the American people, our constituents. So as we approach Public Service Recognition Week, let's commit to engaging and fairly compensating our dedicated public employees to ensure that the federal government continues to provide the critical programs and services upon which the American people depend. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I look forward to the testimony.
I thank the gentleman for his kind remarks, and I will keep the record open for 5 legislative days for any member who would like to submit a written statement. We will now recognize our panel of witnesses. I'm pleased to welcome Ms. Lauren Leo, Chief Human Capital Officer at the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, Ms. Angela Bailey, Chief Human Capital Officer at the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, Ms. Sydney Rose, Chief Human Capital Officer at the U.S. Department of Labor, and Ms. Tawanda Brooks, Chief Human Capital Officer at the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, and Mr. Max Steyer, President and Chief Executive Officer of the Partnership for Public Service, of whom a lot of this actually started in a in-office visit with me many months ago. Welcome to you all, and pursuant to committee rules, all witnesses will be sworn in before they testify. So if you would please rise and raise your hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? All right. Let the record reflect that the witnesses answered in the affirmative. Thank you. May please be seated. In order to allow time for discussion, I would ask that you would limit your oral testimony to 5 minutes, but your entire written statement will be made part of the record. Without objection, we'll go ahead and start. Ms. Leo, you are recognized for 5 minutes.
Chairman Meadows and members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today on the topic of the 2015 Best Places to Work in the Federal Government. Today, I'd like to share with you what makes NASA such a great place to work, as well as what we've learned along the way about employee engagement and using the Federal Employee Viewpoint Survey results as a mechanism to continually improve NASA's work environment. First, I have to admit that I have one of the best jobs in the world. My job is to care for and support the agency's most valuable asset, our amazing workforce. The brilliant rocket scientists, innovative engineers, dedicated support and administrative professionals, and every employee and contractor that make up the NASA family. I work for an agency that inspires, challenges, and empowers our employees daily to carry out missions that benefit us here on Earth. I feel extremely fortunate to wake up every morning to serve NASA's employees, who are truly a tremendous asset to our country and the world. Given that NASA is strongly mission and project focused, our employees believe in the importance of the mission and are heavily engaged in their work. They come to work at NASA because they want to be part of something bigger, not just because it's a job. Every NASA employee impacts the agency's mission daily, no matter his or her pay grade or area of expertise. NASA's employees consistently cite shared values, shared commitment to the mission, and loyalty to the agency as reasons why they feel positively engaged in their jobs. This sense of belonging fuels a deep sense of community at NASA, and this begins at the top. Administrator Charlie Bolden fundamentally believes that his communication is a cornerstone to connecting employees to NASA's mission, and he never misses an opportunity to tell employees that their work is important. Because our employees feel connected to the mission and to each other, we have a very positive work culture with a high level of employee engagement. But we are not satisfied with the status quo, and we are constantly searching for better ways to work. The health of our workforce is a top priority for NASA leadership. Our leadership pays attention to the Federal Employee Viewpoint Survey data and other indicators to monitor the state of the agency and to develop strategies for continually improving employee engagement, connection, and effectiveness. NASA believes that leaders, and particularly supervisors, play a unique role in creating a positive work environment for employees, so we continue to invest in a number of leadership development programs and activities across the agency, from early career to executive, that are designed to better equip current and future agency leaders to carry out our mission. While our 2015 survey results were extremely positive, we observed a few areas where we can continue to improve. In particular, we are currently working to improve the experience across our geographically dispersed centers so that we can close the gap in how employees feel they are valued and recognized. We also want to continue to focus on improving in areas where we've made progress, such as innovation and performance management. Additionally, as part of the broader federal government community, NASA believes that we need to work together to leverage what's working across all federal government agencies. To that end, we are working with the Partnership for Public Service to find new and innovative ways to share promising practices across federal agencies and to develop solutions that demonstrate how agencies can take action on those promising practices. In summary, NASA employees raise the bar of human achievement every day. They are passionate and dedicated men and women who overcome the huge challenges of exploring space and improving life on Earth. This is a workforce that is dedicated to ushering in the future of our nation, including developing new technologies with the goal of one day landing humans on Mars. NASA's employees are building a brighter future for us all and are extremely proud to be part of the NASA family. In my role, I am very privileged to have regular conversations with the many men and women who support and enable NASA's mission. We talk about what inspires them to show up to work every day, what commits them to stay engaged throughout their careers, and what new challenges they are up against. These people are NASA's most valuable asset and my #1 priority. That is why I am proud of NASA's robust strategy to engage our workforce and create a culture of innovation. When I'm asked why NASA is such a great place to work, I say it's about our people. Without them, nothing would be achieved. Mr. Chairman, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today to share the story of NASA's workforce. I would be pleased to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Leo. Ms. Bailey, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Chairman Meadows and Ranking Member Conley and members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today to address our efforts to enhance employee engagement at DHS. I joined DHS in January of this year as a career federal executive with nearly 35 years of service. Most of those years have been spent in human resources in the field and at agency headquarters. I'm responsible for the department's overall human capital program, including providing human resource solutions for DHS headquarters employees. My office also supports employee engagement efforts led by the Secretary and Deputy Secretary. In fact, in my discussions with DHS prior to even coming on board and taking this job, the Undersecretary for Management made it very clear that employee engagement was a top priority for the Secretary and the department as a whole, and as you can imagine, it is also one of my top priorities. DHS is a large and complex agency that holds an extraordinary set of missions. Our employees, many of whom are on the front lines, conduct difficult work under challenging circumstances. Recently, the Secret Service successfully protected 32 heads of state during the 2016 Nuclear Security Summit in Washington, D.C. Transportation security officers discovered 58 firearms in carry-on bags around the nation just last week, 49 of which were loaded and 20 had a round chambered. The Coast Guard safely returned more than 36 migrants found drifting in the Caribbean back to Cuba. The Immigration and Customs Enforcement officers, Customs and Border Protection officers, and Border Patrol agents and their partner agencies seized more than a ton of marijuana in a tunnel connecting California with Mexico. These are only a few examples. Clearly, DHS personnel, including those who provide critical assistance behind the scenes, do amazing work, are our greatest strength, and deserve all the support that we can give them. In my short time at DHS, I can tell you that from the top to the bottom, this department is laser focused on supporting our workforce so that they can accomplish their missions. Engagement is a mission-critical leadership issue. I have seen firsthand how engaged our leaders are in embracing our workforce, and it is clearly a top priority. I was also encouraged to see that 2 of our components, Coast Guard and Citizenship and Immigration Services, with a combined total of 22,000 civilian employees, consistently score above the government-wide average on the Federal Employee Viewpoint Survey. We are leveraging their successful practices across the department. The Secretary, Deputy Secretary, and the Undersecretary for Management have conducted numerous town halls across the country, thanking employees for their service, recognizing achievements, responding to questions, and receiving direct feedback on how we can improve our policies, our services, our operations, and even our opportunities for our employees. Both the Secretary and the Deputy Secretary have also employed undercover boss experiences to literally walk in the shoes of frontline employees and show their respect and appreciation for the tough jobs that they perform daily. DHS component leadership has also reached out directly to their employees during town halls. They've implemented crowdsourcing idea gathering. They've developed DHS-wide and component-specific leadership development to all levels of leadership. Since last year's testimony on this issue, we have accomplished quite a lot, including this year, for the first time, action plans were signed by component leadership and submitted to the Undersecretary, ensuring senior leaders' commitment and support. The Undersecretary and I are also working with representatives from all of the components through our Employee Engagement Steering Committee to ensure implementation of their plans and to share lessons learned and successful practices. A new department-wide employee engagement action plan reflecting input from across DHS has 3 major focus areas: selecting and empowering high-performing leaders, developing excellent leaders at all levels, and enhancing communications. This has led to the deployment of new initiatives, including behavioral interview questions for all senior leadership positions, ensuring we hire high-performing and engaged leaders. An online leadership resource center, which provides guidance and resources for all of DHS leaders covering a number of areas, including innovation toolkits, how to conduct meaningful town hall meetings, and stay interviews. And finally, accountability for SES, with an engagement element added to our 2016 SES performance plans. In addition, we're working with components to encourage employees to participate in the upcoming survey through messaging that states how feedback leads to ideas, and ideas lead to change, and change then leads to a more engaged workforce and increased morale. Every day, the men and women of DHS carry out difficult and dangerous work that is often unseen by the American public. They do an outstanding job and have deep commitment to the mission. Through our efforts dedicated to employee engagement, we are determined to enhance their work experience and honor the contributions of our hardworking and dedicated workforce. Thank you again for supporting our employees who protect us and our great nation.
Thank you, Ms. Bailey. Ms. Rose, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, Chairman Meadows, Ranking Member Connolly, and the distinguished members of the subcommittee. Thank you so much for the opportunity to participate in today's hearing. As the Chief Human Capital Officer for the United States Department of Labor, it is my privilege to report on the Department's climb in Best Places to Work rankings and to share our efforts over the past few years. In 2015, the Labor Department ranked 8th best place to work in the federal government. This was an improvement over our 2014 ranking, where we finally broke into the top 10. The department received recognition from the Partnership for Public Service for receiving the most improved scores for 2014 and 2015. This was an incredible accomplishment for us. Our ranking and survey results have dramatically improved since 2013. Nearly 70% of the department's sub-agencies improved in their 2015 rankings. And in fact, the department's Bureau of International Labor Affairs was recognized as the most improved subcomponent, having improved its ranking by an incredible 165 places. Secretary Tom Perez has made improving employee morale and engagement a top priority since the minute he arrived at the Department of Labor, and he has continually reinforced his commitment towards building a better DOL through employee input and feedback. He came to the department with a belief that an engaged workforce is a more productive workforce. Virtually all communications from the Secretary's office now reinforce his commitment to and the importance of employee feedback. With his vision and well-communicated interest in improving workforce engagement, he appointed his Deputy Chief of Staff, several members of the Secretary's office, and myself to lead employee engagement efforts. The team continues to meet weekly to discuss progress with regard to communications and various workplace initiatives, and provides regular briefings to DOL leadership on a variety of workforce initiatives. One of the most important strategies was for the department to improve our response rates. In 2013, the department's response rate was 44.7%. In 2014, we increased to 71.7%, and unbelievably in 2015, we increased further to 76.5%. To improve response rates, we sent out communications to employees throughout the year, informing them how the survey was being used to implement changes. During the survey period, we sent frequent reminders from the Secretary, Deputy Secretary, and DOL senior officials, reminding them of the importance of the survey. We also use regularly scheduled meetings to remind agency leadership to encourage their employees to participate. Beginning in the summer of 2013, we conducted extensive data analysis and research, which included interviews with other agencies, such as the Departments of Transportation and Justice, in hopes of identifying strategies that we could consider and implement. Our efforts also focused on our labor management relations. We worked closely with our labor unions to implement important workplace flexibilities and to develop and project positive workplace behaviors. Where possible, we try to obtain pre-decisional input and engage in informal dispute resolution, as well as to utilize labor management forums. In March, unions representing DOL employees were even invited to submit survey questions, 8 of which we have included in this year's Federal Employee Viewpoint Survey. In addition, we've worked to increase communication across the department. We've held numerous town hall meetings and listening sessions and have visited all of DOL's regional offices. Employee questions are invited in advance and during the meetings. Electronic suggestion boxes are implemented, and we have even replaced those boxes now with Idea Mill, which is an electronic suggestion box and crowdsourcing tool. Based on employee feedback we've received, we've implemented a number of new initiatives at the Department of Labor. We have a new policy that allows up to 40 hours of duty time for employees to participate in management-improved professional development activities. We created the ROAD program, which stands for Repository of Opportunities, Assignments, and Details. This allows managers to post opportunities that can be short-term and allow employees to apply. It goes without saying our civilian workforce is our greatest asset, and we continually strive to increase their engagement. We welcome your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Rose. Ms. Brooks, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Chairman Meadows, Ranking Member Connolly, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today to testify on behalf of the Department of Housing and Urban Development regarding the best places to work in the federal government. I became the Chief Human Capital Officer for the Department of Housing and Urban Development in 2015 and have been a member of the Senior Executive Service since May 2009. As CHICO, I lead HUD's Office of the Chief Human Capital Officer and oversee implementation of the Department's human capital management strategies, policies, and initiatives in support of HUD's mission. HUD's mission is to create strong, sustainable, inclusive communities and quality, affordable homes for all. It is our nearly 8,000 employees who carry out the Department's mission on behalf of millions of hardworking American families in all 50 states, the District of Columbia, U.S. territories, and the 4 insular areas every day. The link between an employee's engagement and mission accomplishment is well documented in private and public sector research, as well as in HUD's own experience. When we use employee engagement as a measure of success for the department, we make HUD a better workplace and, in turn, improve outcomes for the American people. The best available measure for employee engagement in the federal service is the Federal Employee Viewpoint Survey. In 2015, HUD was recognized by the Office of Personnel Management as the most improved agency for employee engagement by the Partnership for Public Service as the most improved mid-sized agency on their annual Best Places to Work in the Federal Government Index. The department improved its EVS scores on 69 out of 71 questions, with an average increase of nearly 5 percentage points. 2 indicate significant movement. Notably, our employee engagement score rose to 61.8%, HUD's second highest mark since OPM began keeping records, and just short of our all-time high in 2012. HUD also was the most improved agency in the government on the new IQ, a measure of workplace inclusion and empowerment. HUD increased a full 5 points, while the government overall only increased 1 point. Employees ranked their leaders and supervisors 6% and 5% higher than the prior year, and their overall view of their jobs improved 5%. And a record number of employees filled out the survey. HUD achieved its highest participation rate on record. 74% of its employees took the survey. In 2014, HUD's level of participation was just 51%. HUD's improved employee engagement scores are due in large part to the commitment made by HUD's most senior leaders. Secretary Castro and Deputy Secretary Coloretti have made employee engagement a sustained priority, and they have shown employees their feedback is taken seriously. The Secretary and Deputy Secretary placed a strong emphasis on responding to employees' requests through HUD's internal social media tools, including HUD Connect, which provides ways to directly solicit and receive employee feedback. They also prioritize meeting with employees in HUD's headquarters and in regional and field offices, and through regional town halls. In addition, the Deputy Secretary is carrying out an ambitious management agenda through a series of collaborative deep dive projects aimed at strengthening the department. We also attributed HUD's increase in employee engagement to proactively sharing the 2014 and 2015 EVS results with employees. We provided opportunities to all HUD employees to access and interpret the EVS results. In particular, we provided detailed briefings for managers, identifying not just areas of strength and opportunity, but appropriate peer offices for comparisons and sharing best practices. As a result, managers were able to learn more about the experiences of their career employees, not just at the agency level, but often at the individual office and division levels. These steps have led to real change in our various program offices. In conclusion, currently, HUD is engaged in a planning process that ensures employee engagement will remain a priority in 2016 and beyond. OCHICO is continuing to provide all HUD employees with access to HUD's EVS data so they understand the opportunities and challenges in their work unit and how the changes they make contribute to HUD's ability to meet our mission. I've served 26 years in the federal government, and I know from experience that having a committed workforce is essential to delivering the best service to the American people. One of the most important measures of the quality of a federal workplace is engagement of its employees. As such, while managing OCHICO operations, I've also championed leadership, development, diversity and inclusion, and employee engagement. HUD's employees are essential to fulfilling our mission. Their success is HUD's success, and I'm proud to serve them and the American people. Again, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Brooks. Mr. Steyer, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Yep, there we go. Thank you so much, Chairman Meadows, Ranking Member Connolly, Congressman Mulvaney, for having this hearing. It's phenomenal that you're shining a spotlight on such an important issue. Thank you also for the trips you've been taking to federal agencies. It's a really terrific thing. I've heard great feedback, and building more relationships between Congress and the executive branch is absolutely vital. Ranking Member Connolly, you raised a question in your opening statement about, is it NASA mission? I will tell you, it is not the mission, it's leadership. What the data says across the board is you've got a highly committed workforce to whatever they're doing, if they're working at GSA or HUD, but where you have great leadership, you have engaged employees. And when I say great leaders, that really breaks down to a set of different issues that includes the ability to communicate effectively, get good information out, build trust with the employees, and also create a performance culture that's absolutely essential. And I would note that, again, Chairman Meadows, you cited some terrific stats at the front end. There's some good stories, some bad stories. There's a lot of room for improvement, and I think focusing on agencies, I'm proud to be on this panel with all the folks here who are great public servants. It's a great way of bringing up the good things that our folks are doing that they can be spread across government. I want to focus my time, however, on making 4 recommendations of things that I think you all can do to help improve government management through improving government employee engagement. First and foremost, that would be modernizing the statute that is the basis for the information and all the work that you're doing here right now, the Federal Employee Viewpoint Survey. Statute was part of the 2004 NDAA. It now needs to be modernized for 4 different reasons. Most important, and that is that OPM is in the process right now of rewriting the regulations. There are 45 required questions. They're bringing that down to 11. A number of the questions that you cited, Chairman Meadows, at the beginning will not have to be required going forward if those regulations go through. I think it's essential that this committee weigh in on making sure that critical information is actually gathered. OPM has done a terrific job. This is a change that I think, unfortunately, would unravel some important things, including our ability to do the best places to work rankings, because one of our 3 key questions would be removed from the regulations as well. So we hope that the committee will look, number 1, at trying to ensure that the right questions are actually included in the survey. Number 2, the survey needs to be conducted every year by the Office of Personnel Management. The statute currently does not require that to happen, Kudos, frankly, to OPM under the Obama administration. They've chosen to do it every year. Clearly, it's a more efficient operation to have one entity do the survey for all of government. It's both cost-effective and it enables comparison across agencies, which you lose if OPM isn't required to do it for everybody. So that would be the second point on change that we think would be really important. Third piece, which is absolutely vital, is getting the information out much faster. OPM has accelerated the time. You'll see some nodding heads here about that. The truth of the matter is that you ask someone's opinion about what can be improved in their agency, and if they don't see anything done with that opinion for 6 months or 7 months or 8 months, that's a real problem. The only way the agencies can actually do anything with this is if that information is turned around a lot faster. And therefore, I think that's a place, again, where you could legislatively put some incentives to make sure that it's getting out there much faster, not just to the agencies, but to the public, to organizations like the Partnership for Public Service. And finally, we think the information should actually be reported by occupation, because that would enable really critical comparisons across the board wherever feasible. So 3 other very quick suggestions for improvements that this committee could lead the way on. And the second one would be making sure that political leaders are actually held accountable for addressing engagement. So one interesting thing that goes on here, we talk about a performance culture. In any other organization I've seen, you have the top leadership that has certain expectations that cascade down through the rest of the organization. The career workforce have performance plan obligations. The political workforce doesn't. Some agencies require performance plans for political appointees, but that's frankly a rarity. That ought to be done across the board so the career workforce can actually see how their work lines up against the priorities at the top for the agencies. And that should include a focus on and talent management and employee engagement. Number 3 would be improving the effort to create a culture of recognition and improve manager performance. So this is an area that I hope I can come back to, but we should be switching the probation period presumption that you automatically become non-probationary after you've come through a year. Rather, our view is that a manager should actually have to make that choice, and the same goes for someone coming into a management position. If we have time at the end here or during your questions, I'd love to get into that. And then the last piece I would like to focus on is just what you're seeing here, the sharing of best practice. To my mind, everything that should happen in the federal government's happening somewhere, just not in all the places it needs to. And we need to figure out ways to scale best practice, and that's a place your oversight can make a very big difference. Thank you very much.
Well, I thank each of you for your testimony, Max. Obviously, some of those recommendations are spot on, but I would like to share that in other hearings, other than those with a title like we have today, employee engagement continues to be a big issue. After my visit to NASA, I can tell you that we had a few others that were here, and I suggested that they get with NASA in terms of that employee engagement component to see what they're doing. And now, I wrote myself a note, so I'm going to see the next time they come back if they actually got with you. But with that, I'm going to go ahead and recognize the gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. Mulvaney, for 5 minutes for his opening questions.
And I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Bailey, I don't want to appear to be beating up on you, but I don't know if the coincidence of your being here today. We just had a hearing this morning regarding TSA, which I think is in your department, isn't it? Okay. That didn't go very well. They weren't very happy. The subject matter of the hearing, were you here for that?
No, sir, I was not.
Okay. The subject of the hearing was some of the issues that we've been facing with whistleblowers and so forth. We had 2 folks here who feel like they had been mistreated. And I had some stories from my district about folks, and I'm not laying blame because I know that's not your department, but that was the subject matter of this morning's hearing is how could TSA be run a little bit better? And I listened to what the chairman had to say about DHS, what you had to say about DHS. And I'm like, again, can't blame you because you've only been there for what, 3 months or something like that?
Yes,
So, and I get that. So I guess if I wanted to skip all of the rhetoric and get down to the bottom line, when is it going to get better at DHS? Y'all are last. When can we expect you to say be in the top half, but judged by your own employees' feedback on what kind of place this is to work? Top half, by when?
I do believe, sir, that with all of the efforts that we have actually put forth within this last year, and actually for the last couple of years, I do think that what we're going to see is actual improvement in our EVS scores. There is an absolute dedicated commitment. We agree leadership matters most. We have, from the secretary to the deputy secretary to the undersecretary and on down, we've made a concerted effort to get out and listen to the employees
And Ms.
and
Bailey,
find
again,
out.
I don't want to cut you off, but that's fine. That's what we call rhetoric. That's not really, everybody says that. Everybody says it's a critical thing everybody said the same thing. Now, NASA and DOL and HUD, it's actually working. They made it a priority, and they've listened to the people, and they've done, everybody used words. We've had town hall meetings with our employees. We get that, okay? And that's the right thing to do. But our question is, when is it actually going to work? All right, so let's pretend that we're not a congressional hearing and you're at a private company. You're working for Google, and you're the human resources chairman at Google, and everybody at Google hates working at Google. And you come into the board of directors and you say, okay, here's what we're going to do to fix it. We're going to do our town hall meetings, and we're going to do all these wonderful things. And we turn to you and say, okay, when will it get better? What is your answer?
Well, if I may, sir, everybody does not hate coming to work to DHS. In fact, most of the men and women at DHS are incredibly proud to work at DHS. When things get better, actually, is whenever we're able to make concrete changes that affect their lives positively.
How did y'all do on the percentage of employees who have a positive thing to say about the honesty and integrity of leadership? The average across the whole system is 50. How did y'all do?
I'm not sure, sir.
Probably worse than 50? Maybe, probably. I don't have the numbers in front of me. But again, you're last. And if that's average, it's fair to say that you're last. And again, we're not trying to beat up on you. All we want to know is, when is it going to get better? And just let us know. If it's a year, that's fine. If it's 3 years, that's fine. But I will let you know. The next question is, okay, if you tell us it's going to be 3 years, what is the penalty for when it isn't? Because at some point, in fact, the gentlemen who were this morning, the very insightful, down-to-earth guys, they said, look, the only way it's going to get better at TSA is when we have accountable leadership. That's it, period, end of story. So my question is, when are we going to have accountable leadership? And if we don't, who pays the price? Because right now, I think the people who are paying the price, at TSA at least, are the employees and the public, which is, that's a really bad group to have to pay the price. The people who are running the organization at DHS and TSA are not paying the price. The people who work there are paying the price. The people they're supposed to serve are paying the price. And we're going to try and turn that upside down to where the people who pay the price for failure are the people who are responsible for failure. At TSA, the people who wait in line to get through the security are not the ones who are not doing their job. In fact, what we heard today, and if you believe them, and I tend to do it, is the folks who are actually working there on the line, the folks meeting face-to-face with the public, are not the folks who are not doing their job. It's the folks, no offense, at your level and higher who are not doing their job. And what we're interested in is trying to create a system where the people who are screwing up are the people who pay the price, and not the people who are sort of the victims or the folks who are ending up on the short end of the stick. So my question to you, before my time runs out, is give us a date. When will y'all get better?
I believe that we will make incremental improvements beginning this year.
Okay, that's great. And I look forward to the hearing next year. And if you're not last next year, I will be the first to congratulate you. I'd love to see you in the most improved categories at DOL and HUD. I'm sorry, I didn't want to focus on the negative, but we did just have this hearing this morning. But if you're last next year, or you haven't made, if you're next to last, this hearing might be less fun than it was this year. Thanks very much, Mr. Chairman.
I thank the gentleman. The chair recognizes the ranking member of the subcommittee, Mr. Conley, for a question.
I thank the chair, and I think my friend from South Carolina makes some very important points. And listening to his questioning, I reflect on the 20 years I spent in the private sector in management. And one of the principles, certainly, that I think is applicable is that you have to differentiate between performers and non-performers. People with stellar performance and people with adequate or subadequate performance. If you treat everybody's performance the same when it comes to recognition, you are saying to your stellar performers, I can come in early and stay late. I can donate time on the weekends, and it doesn't matter. I'm going to be treated like Harry Houdini there who is a clock watcher, shows up at 9 and leaves promptly at 5 and never volunteers for anything. And as far as management is concerned, we're the same. And Mr. Steyer, I'm looking at a statistic that says 73% of private sector workers believe management recognizes superior performance. But in the public sector, only 44% believe that. That tells me there's a problem if we're going to get at what Mr. Mulvaney was talking about, which is, okay, give me a time frame, but we want to see this improve. Part of the solution, it seems to me, or part of the problem, is this recognition of performance problem. Do you want to comment on that, Max?
I think you're 100% right. I think, frankly, you need definitely to be able to recognize good performance if you want to encourage that to be the norm. And we don't have a culture of performance recognition in government. And that's one of the reasons why I think federal employees are risk averse. They see real downside and no real upside. So you have to provide that upside in order to be able to get the innovation that you want. Again, I think not to pick on NASA in this context, but that's an area that they focus a lot on, and I think that's extremely important. If I might also add, it's also very important not to roll up too much in the way of the data. So we talk about Department of Homeland Security being last. It's a very large organization with multiple subcomponents, some of which are doing extremely well, like the Coast Guard, which we heard about earlier. And so I think you need to disaggregate to some degree. Certainly, you need to hold top leadership accountable for the whole thing. But there are bright spots at DHS that ought to be, recognized as you're suggesting here. But your point is phenomenally important. We have the Service to America medals, the SAMMys, where we find extraordinary people. Next week we have a breakfast. The 4th, the 3rd. I hope you'll be there. Just awesome stories about what you get when government's doing really right.
I remember once in the private sector working with somebody head of a big division, and he had a bonus pool that year at bonus time, and he decided to give everyone a $250 bonus rather than make the tough decision of Mr. Meadows gets one because of stellar performance and Mr. Connolly doesn't because we know what. And he's a Democrat. No, that's not. But if you don't do that differentiation, you are saying to everybody, we're going to dummy down to the mean. And that's not how to get high performance. And it actually has a morale effect on the high performers because I feel unappreciated. Anyway, I want to push back just a little bit, Mr. Steyer, about you're saying, well, it's really about leadership more than mission. That's a little hard to believe. So, Ms. Leo, how many agencies were kind of put together to form NASA? How many agencies do you represent here?
One agency.
One. You got a lot of missions? I mean, you go to Mars, get them in on the moon. Today would say person. Space shuttle is over. I mean, are you doing oceanographic research, climate change research, or, I mean, you got a lot of missions.
We're doing a plethora of missions.
Plethora of missions. Ms. Bailey, I guess you got a plethora of missions.
Yes, sir.
So you've got TSA, you got Customs,
Correct.
you got Border Control,
Yes,
you got Secret Service.
correct.
What else did you get? You got 22 agencies when you were formed.
Yes, we have 22.
So that's a world of difference than sort of the cohesive mission that helps provide an organizing principle for NASA.
Well,
Would that be fair?
that is fair.
How many employees you got?
Close to 240,000.
And how many have you got, Ms. Leo?
About 17,000 civil servants.
250,000 almost, 17,000. Well, I'm going to accuse my friend Max Steyer of oversimplifying. I think DHS has a much more difficult task from day one. That's not to let anyone off the hook, but many orders of magnitude different than NASA's wonderful success, and good for you. I'll bet you Ms. Bailey's sitting there thinking, I wish I had Ms. Leo's problems. Because trying to bring all this together in one happy family when, and I was in the private sector, and we were a contractor to the administration trying to figure out this new thing called the Department of Homeland Security. What would be, I remember looking at the org charts and trying to figure out, well, what would go where and who would go where and what's the logic of it. And sometimes there was logic and sometimes there wasn't. So trying to cohere all of that and infuse it with mission and morale and productivity is a challenge. And Max, you want to redeem yourself a little bit?
I do. I feel like the ranking
And then
member has filibustered here and not offered me an opportunity to respond here. So like the
That would never happen.
We don't filibuster here in the House of Representatives, Mr. Chair.
all right,
We're not the Senate.
all right. Well, so if I might, Mr. Chairman, respond.
Yeah, go ahead and respond
Okay.
quickly.
Very
Yeah, I think
quickly.
we've got votes pretty soon,
Okay,
so that's
just
why.
just very quickly, in all seriousness, there's no question that an organization of 240,000 people is a much trickier proposition than an organization of 17,000. However, that's a different question about saying whether it's the mission or it's the leadership. If you look across this table and you ask each of these individuals, are they at their agency because they want to be at their agency, my bet is they'll say they care about housing, they care about labor, they care about Homeland Security, they care about the issues of NASA. The federal workforce, if you look at the data, says that by and large the employees are as mission committed across the board as any organization. Where you see the differential is in their perspective of their leadership, not in their mission commitment. And that is true, and to your point earlier, in the private sector, same thing. People who care about NASA issues are at NASA. People who care about Homeland Security, law enforcement, whatever issues are at DHS. What differentiates their views about their work environment and whether they're engaged is whether they believe that their leadership is giving them the resources they need to do their jobs well, whether they can see from what they do how they're connected to the overall mission, whether they, on and on and on. That's what the data shows. I'd love to continue this conversation further. The turnaround issue is a separate one about the size that DHS has to deal with. And that's one reason why I say break it into blocks, into the subcomponents. Thank you.
All right, thank you. The chair recognizes himself for a series of questions, so I'll give you a softball. Is it, Mr. Steyer, is it always the large agencies that perform the poorest, or have we had examples of very small agencies that have had very poor rankings in the past?
So
Like
again,
Chemical Safety Board.
well, or bluntly, I will take a DHS example. Look at the Secret Service, which was an organization that actually had very high scores that you've seen decline over the course of the last 4 and 5 years. And I would posit that that's about leadership again. When you look at the FDIC and the SEC, they swap places in our rankings. I think that's about leadership. One was on the top, one was at the bottom. They flipped, so that's what you see. The large, this is a statistical issue. The larger you get, the more close to the mean you're likely to get. Sure. And so that's going to drive
Is
the
that
overall
why
numbers.
we rank them out as most improved for large agencies,
Absolutely.
medium-sized, small agencies? et
Absolutely.
cetera?
And at some point, you slice it too much. So the reality is we keep getting asked, well, we're a large agency, but we're 240,000, we're not like 15,000. But you can only do so much of that.
Right. If you get it down small enough, you become the best and the worst of the subset.
It's super large, exactly.
So-
But I think the bottom line here is that you look at the data, leadership is like 2/3 of what's driving what we're seeing here. And that's, political leadership. And there are things you can do, which is what I've suggested to help encourage the better behaviors.
All right. So, Ms. Leo, when you're on the top, everybody guns for that top position. So how have you managed to stay on the top for 4 years running? Because some of the most critical surveys in the automobile industry actually go towards Lexus and Mercedes-Benz and some of the ones that you would think of very high quality, because the expectation rises along with that. So the expectations are that you're going to be number one from here on out. How do you manage that expectation and continue to deliver satisfaction to your employees?
Well, thank you for the question. We are really focused on our trend, and so we want to see our trend to continue to go up. And so we think that if someone overtakes us because their trend goes, they increase more than ours, as long as we're still increasing and listening to the feedback of our employees, that's a good news story, because
All right.
it really is about the health of the federal government.
Valid point. All right. So, Ms. Rose, your energy was obvious in your testimony earlier. So I wish you would get a little energetic. But how do you make that energy, obviously you have, contagious in the Department of Labor? I mean, we've talked about engagement and other things, but how have you been able to, other than town hall meetings and things, why do they feel like they're important, your rank and file?
I think it's because we're not just listening, but we're doing as a result of the
All right.
listening.
Now, that was the answer that I wanted to hear, and so thank you for that response.
You're welcome.
Because here's the interesting thing, is we can do a number of surveys. And I used to be in that business. You'd send the surveys out. If you got the information, you checked the box, you did the surveys, and if nothing happened with those results, two things happened. One is employee morale went down. Two, I guess the participation rate in subsequent years went down. And so if you are doing that, I saw the recommendation is that the feedback gets quicker, and everybody started nodding and getting quicker. And I see some people in the audience nodding as well when I say that now. How do we do that effectively without making it a without making it laborious on management, where then we're essentially surveying to survey to make sure that we're checking the box? Max, how do we make it quicker?
I think, one, to recognize OPM has made it faster already, but there's more that can be done. An example is the surveys held open for 3 months. Doesn't need to be that way, in my view, in today's day and age. There's a lot of technology and methodology that allows it to be done in a shorter time horizon. So if you start asking people in the beginning of April, which is what's happening right now, the surveys in the field, and you're not done till the end of June, that already means that folks that got their opinion asked in April are waiting forever before their information is actually collected. I think that, like with a lot of things, this is a place where you can legislate and say this is our expectation, that this is the private sector benchmark, and we expect the government to meet it. And if you did that, I think we would wind up with a faster turnaround, and as I might add, it should be public as well.
Well, and as you know, we're going to continue to highlight this, not for the benefit of this committee, but for the benefit of the workforce, the 2 million federal workers that I continue to hear each and every day of both wonderful applause and frustration, sometimes going hand in hand, and that's why we're going to do it. So let me close before I recognize the gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Grothman. Ms. Bailey, let me come to you, and one's a positive and one's a negative. So let me give you the positive first. I was able to hear from the Coast Guard here recently, and one of the wonderful parts of your group is the Coast Guard, and their ranking being much higher than some of the others within your purview of 22 different agencies. So as we see the Coast Guard, one of the things that impressed me was the number of volunteer hours that the Coast Guard have put in place right here in the district. I mean, the numbers were mind-boggling. In fact, a gentleman that I saw had a sunburn because he had been out volunteering on a weekend to actually clean up a park here in D.C. And so I want to just publicly say thank you for, if you'll pass along my thank you and recognition to the thousands of hours, not just with the Coast Guard, but that was a particular example because it seemed above and beyond in terms of the average. But the thousands of volunteer hours that have been put forth from the Department of Homeland Security. So applause there.
Thank you.
My concern, and so we'll come to the other second part of this, is that in March of this year, the commissioner for CBP actually told agents, and I'll quote, when it was with regards to the President Obama's executive order, says, well, if you don't like it, it's time to look for another job, or actually, quote, look for another job. Can you imagine in any place where that would be encouraging to employee morale?
Sorry about that. I wasn't sure with the button. I do understand with regard to that situation. We have had conversations with Customs and Border and Protection, and are working with them on ways to engage with the workforce with regard to the policies that they carry out, and to ensure that everybody really kind of in some ways sees engagement as a team sport. And
So engagement means engagement at another agency?
No,
Because
sir.
looking for another job would, and here's my concern, and so here, I want to make the message clear. Secret Service, CBP, when we look at some of those, the bottom four in terms of the component, we have to see improvement there. We get more whistleblowers and concerns from people out of those particular components of under your supervision than any others in the entire federal workforce. And because of that, it lets me know that there's a big problem. And so before, do I have your commitment that within the next 120 days that you will have a plan on how we're going to address those four lowest in terms of improvement? Do I have your commitment to do that?
Yes, sir, absolutely, because we have quite a few things underway right now.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Bailey. I'll recognize the gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Grothman, for 5 minutes.
Sure. I want to talk to Ms. Rose a little bit. You're kind of one of the stars of the day because your satisfaction scores were some of the biggest increases out here. Could you just give us a general background on some of the initiatives that you may have started in the last few years that are the reasons for the big increase in your scores?
Yes, I would be delighted to. The listening sessions, which started the whole thing, were extremely...
See, that's the nicest question I'll ask all bienniums, see, so.
Which started the whole thing, and it goes back to what Chairman Meadows discussed with me. We gathered data, and we looked for things that we could do right away, based on employee feedback and suggestions, and things that were longer term. Employees told us, we think you could do a better job training supervisors and managers, preparing people to be leaders at DOL. So we built a curriculum specifically to address that, and we call it Leading at Labor. And we've just started an Emerging Leaders program, which gives people who have aspirations towards leadership roles at the department a chance to start acquiring some skills in that direction. We did simple things. People said, can we have a microwave in the cafeteria? It would be really nice to have some place to warm our food at lunchtime. We put microwaves in the cafeteria. We did small things, we did large things, we did long-term things, and then we kept telling people what we were doing. You said this, we did this. You suggested this, we're looking at this. So it's a continual dialogue with our workforce.
Okay. Is there anything you did in particular to address leadership styles among your
The leadership training that I mentioned is really focused more on soft skills. Most of our leaders are in the positions they're in because they are very good at the technical aspects of the work they do. But we decided to offer a curriculum that really addressed the soft skills, the soft side of leading, how to communicate, how to inspire, how to challenge, how to lead.
Okay, now I see on the screen next to me that they're calling votes on the floor. That's what they pay us the big bucks for. Mr. Chairman, you want to take over?
Sure. If the gentleman yields back, the chair will recognize Mr. Jordan for a few questions, and then we'll...
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Steyer, the Partnership for Public Service. So here's what I want to know. So we got this survey, and we're talking to federal employees. We do it every year, and we find out what, the satisfaction, what they think about their working environment and everything else. Is there work that you've done that actually looks at it from the taxpayer perspective, from citizens who have to interact with these federal agencies? And do you see a correlation between agencies that have dissatisfied employees and the satisfaction or lack of satisfaction taxpayers and citizens experience when interacting with that respective agency?
It's a terrific question, and the answer is yes, you do see that correlation. We don't have as much research done in the public sector as I'd like to see done, but in the private sector, there's a ton of data that show improved employee engagement, shows improved performance, increased
Which is what we'd all expect.
Right. the VA actually has some good data that shows in those hospitals where they have higher employee engagement rates, you have higher customer service.
Exactly what we'd expect.
Yeah, it's what you would expect, and it's there. What's also interesting is subsequent to our starting the Best Places to Work rankings, the government of Great Britain and Australia, Canada, you're now seeing this as a global phenomenon where other countries are recognizing that a good way to hold leadership accountable is to listen to the employees and to focus on employee engagement. So,
DHS is, the fact that DHS continues to be at the bottom, the worst, employee satisfaction is the lowest at that particular agency, also most likely means that the taxpayers who have to interact with them, as Mr. Mulvaney pointed out today, specifically taxpayers who have to interact with TSA, probably also aren't too satisfied with the kind of service they're getting from that particular agency.
I would say it slightly differently, and I'll give you the reason why.
Okay.
I think that there is an opportunity to improve taxpayer results by improving the quality of the leadership experience of the employees at DHS.
Well, that's good. I mean, you said it.
But I say that because I think it's still the case. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I'm all for the best places to work and not the worst places. I still think that the American taxpayer is getting a lot of good service from DHS. There's an opportunity to make it better, is my only point.
Well, I'm not saying it. You said it in the glass half full way. That's fine.
That's the way my mom taught me.
No, that's good, and I appreciate that. Some agencies I would use the glass half full, others I wouldn't. And one I wouldn't is the Internal Revenue Service. I notice on the list, Department of Treasury is 16 out of 19 when it comes to the big agencies, and more specifically, an agency that every single taxpayer has to interact with. Some of these, I bet I don't have that many people who have to interact with NASA, right? Taxpayers. Probably just does it. But I know I got a bunch of folks I get the privilege to represent who have to interact with the Internal Revenue Service. And they are in the lower third when it comes to employee work satisfaction, and they're going down. And meanwhile, we have this same agency, when you talk to any taxpayer out there, lack of answers to questions, and you talk to some who've been systematically targeted by the Internal Revenue Service. I mean, this to me is a important correlation where IRS is way down the list, and then when you talk to taxpayers, oh my goodness, when they have to deal with that agency, their level of dissatisfaction probably off the charts too. Do you have any specific information or data on that particular one?
Well, first and foremost, you noted, IRS is part of Treasury. It's the biggest part of the Treasury Department. So it drives the numbers there. One thing I would note is we think there's an opportunity to actually.
And I would say this, just to interrupt. When you look at the numbers of the lower four, DHS being the last, but of the lower four, two of them are going up in satisfaction of employees. IRS is going down. Even their employee satisfaction with their working environment is going down even faster and lower than DHS. So they're moving. It'll just, if this continues, be a couple of years where Ms. Bailey won't have to take all the tough questions. It'll be Mr. Koskinen from the IRS taking it, if he's not already gone. He'll be the one have to answer the tough questions.
Well, two quick things. The one is that we think there is an opportunity, the partnership, to do something around customer service similar to best places around employee engagement, and that would be to create a common customer service index for the federal government, and that would be a way that you would get more of your better correlations, but frankly, it would provide good accountability information for government agencies. So that's a conversation that we would welcome to have. So that'd be terrific. Thank you.
I think Ms. Brooks, let me ask you one question, because obviously you've got a long ways to go, but you've made unbelievable improvements. So what one piece of advice, maybe to Ms. Bailey or to others who are watching, is saying, what one piece of advice, if we were to give them one thing to improve, that you've seen make the biggest difference at HUD, what would that be?
Leadership involvement in looking at the data and understanding the data.
So getting leadership to actually look at the data and then actually having interaction with the team.
Yes.
Because I've experienced that in a personal way with Ms. Leo and the team there at NASA. I mean, we were teleconferenced all over, and we didn't have some of the leadership in there, even though it was a leadership part, because they wanted to free it up to allow for very candid discussions with a member of Congress. But what you're saying is having leadership involved, but then having it open and transparent where there's no retaliation with regards to what the comments that are made.
Yes. First and foremost, we wanted to make sure that we had full participation from employees. So we got the participation up so we could have the data. And then we had all leadership involved to be able to look at the data and made that data available to everyone. And we broke the data down to for every organization within HUD and had employees at every level to be able to look at the data and broke it down into engagement plans for every organization.
Well,
I think that was the biggest gain for our organization, was to be able to look at the data, understand it, and act on it.
well, thank you, Ms. Brooks. I want to just say thank you so much. Did the ranking member want to have a comment?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to follow up a little bit on the IRS, Mr. Steyer, because presumably if your agency were hauled before Congress on real and bogus allegations for dozens of times, if over $1 billion of your budget was slashed, if people couldn't fill vacancies even through attrition because of those cutbacks, if your technology was getting more and more ancient every day and you had, hard drive collapses and all kinds of problems integrating systems and so forth, and you couldn't even meet customer satisfaction standards because of inadequate resources, presumably that might have an impact on your morale and your productivity and your job satisfaction if you work for that agency. Fair enough?
I think a smile says all it needs to say. I thank the ranking.
I got to go vote.
Thank you, the ranking member.
But there can't just be one point of view about IRS around here. And as long as I'm here, there won't be.
And I think it's important to be focused on the employee engagement because all of us benefit with more engaged employees.
And I do want to stress
Thank
that.
you.
I've had the opportunity to meet with IRS employees and found them very engaging and willing to look for real responses. And so, so on that, I think it gets back to management again, and all of you have said that. And so we're going to give you a few additional questions. We're going to vote right now, and that way we don't hold you. So we're going to go ahead and finish up this hearing. But I want to say thank you. Thank you for not only being here today, thank you for your testimony, but thank you to the great federal workers that are out there that are serving the American taxpayer each and every day. If there is no further business, without objections, subcommittee stands adjourned.